Like this awkward silence. I would just add a seniority, yeah. Yeah. Planning commission actually never had like a vice chair.
Don't have anybody.
Yeah, it's like, for example.
It's all the same people, but
Like when Chick-fil-A will come forward probably in the next couple months.
yeah.
Within a
that'll
couple
be-
months, it's just going to
design.
be design review. There's no, it's an outright land use. There's no, not asking for any variances or anything like that. So that would just be design review versus like when
That's good.
Byway came in, because they were asking for some variances. It was then, we ran it concurrently, but you had your land use and then your design review.
There's gonna be a lot of issues in that one comes in.
Really?
You ever been to one lately?
The Gresham one actually calmed down quite a bit.
Not out in Clackamas.
Oh, well.
I got locked into my parking space for 10 minutes. I could not get out because of the drive-through traffic.
They're taking, it's a long queue that's internal to its own parcel.
It goes from the street behind Target all the way up, all the way. It goes this way, then they divide it into lanes. And after 12, you couldn't pull out of the parking place. I'm about ready to run them all over. I'll tell you. But if you've seen any when they first open, they've got to have to come up with a plan and they should know that.
It's, there's no dine-in. It's walk up or drive through only.
That's the problem. The car. They'll be out on Gleason, I guarantee it.
Oh, no, we'll have to.
You're gonna have to look at it. You're gonna have to really, give me traffic pattern problems.
Well, it is 6 o'clock and Commissioner Dirks, the meeting is yours.
Up the meeting. Go to tax amendment for house and freight movement.
Thank you, Commission, members of the Commission. Thank you again for meeting on a Friday evening, quite unusual and hopefully the only time it'll be a Friday evening. I just want to go over a bit of background before I turn it over to Keegan and MIG to go over kind of the technical components, the findings of fact. But a lot of this originated back in 2006, 2007, when Metro implemented what's called Title IV, and that was to protect significant industrial lands within the Portland metropolitan region. Because that did impact our commercial industrial zone, there were required changes we had to make, mostly to restrict commercial uses within that zone to promote more industrial uses. You were on the city council at that time when that came before them. And so there was a lot of code work 2008 adopted in 2009. Somewhere towards the end of that process, doing the required components, the Planning Commission and Council then also took some additional action, and that was to prohibit warehousing and freight movement. And the rationale at the time was quite solid and good. Wood Village is 1 square mile, as you know. We don't have a lot of open land, and at the time, warehousing was pretty much just a big building with a lot of shelving. Lower wage jobs, typically not a lot in terms of tax value. Freight movement, very similar. It takes up a large amount of space. If there's a building, it's typically a small office, maybe some shop space, storage space, but it's essentially a giant parking lot. And the Council and Planning Commission, back in 2008 and 9 said, you know what, we're seeing a lot of stuff coming in this region of high tech or higher tech manufacturing. Maybe if we prohibit these uses, they'll turn over into something of a higher and bigger and better use. With what we saw, we had Merrick's that had recently left, but they had been here, what was going on at the time, it made a lot of sense. Since that time, though, what we've seen is that particular area of our city, the soils are not good for high tech manufacturing, whether it's wafers or otherwise. And, a good example is that Element 6 up off of Stark, they had to dig down a lot to stabilize the dirt and actually put in a special foundation for what they do there. And we at the time thought, oh, proximity railroad, great for freight movement. No, high-tech places do not like being near vibrating railroad tracks. The other change that happened that we've seen over the last several years, warehousing is not what it used to be. There's a lot of high tech that goes into warehousing now where it's not people moving stuff, it's robots moving stuff. And that adds, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to a project that then goes on the tax rolls. We also see a different level of employment with that, and that, yes, there are your lower wage warehouse workers, but then you have your technicians working on the specialty robots, conveyor belts, et cetera. So warehousing has changed in the decade plus since this was prohibited. The other thing, freight movement that we've seen, especially since the pandemic started, is critical to our region and nation in terms of moving stuff and the difficulties that we're seeing in moving stuff. And there are currently 2 large freight operators. They're existing non-conforming, they've existed long before. They both want to expand. And they can't right now because they're existing non-conforming. They have to exist as they do today. And while it's still true about the terms of property tax, they're essentially a big parking lot. One does want to build, a brand new facility, tear down essentially a 1960s or 70s thing that you don't even know it's there until you walk further back on the property. Build a whole new kind of hub. And then in terms of overall economic viability, drivers, those are good jobs. To say that they're non-skilled would be an insult to professional drivers, but it's a skill that you can learn, on the job, where you don't need to go to college for it. It's something that has a lot of access to a lot of people. And in talking with the owners of the 2 current ones, they start people out $50,000, $60,000 a year, upwards of 80 or 90 or 100,000. And so when we're looking at the economic vitality of the region, not necessarily a bad thing. And the one last piece of the impetus to this was part of Metro 4 divvied up lands into 3 industrial designations. So it's regionally significant, and then employment. Our code went to what was kind of the most constrictive, and that was limiting retail or commercial to 20,000 square feet or less. And that way just blanketed the whole zone. But in fact, north of Sandy Boulevard is industrial land. South is an employment land. Employment lands can actually have up to 60,000 square feet of commercial retail space. Why is that important? Well, yeah, Walmart's 120,000 square feet, so they can't really do anything. They're existing non-conforming. But places like Camping World who want to expand currently cannot. This would allow further expansion of some of our other commercial enterprises in that zone to expand while still following the intent of Title IV. And so these were kind of some fixes that we wanted to take forward to get consideration. We took it to the council for the adoption consideration process in February. It took a little time to, as you see in the report, the code changes themselves aren't that technical or complex. It's changing an N to a yes, and then a couple of new language around the commercial pieces. But we had to do a traffic impact analysis, and then as Keegan will go through kind of the basic findings of fact on this. So before he does that, any questions on the merits, the why, the background?
So this is basically property that's north.
It's north of the freeway, yeah. And for all of it, I mean, it all currently exists. We already have, freight movement. Nothing's changing. We're reverting some things back to that pre-2009 code change.
It was kind of like from the hotel east on that property there, north of Sandy.
Actually, the hotel is existing non-conforming, but we're not going to play with it.
Oh, I'm just, the property that's east of the hotel is what we're kind of the area we're looking at.
It's
mostly.
everything north of the freeway. So, I mean, this actually.
Oh, everything north. Oh,
So it includes like Walmart, Camping World, all that land is.
Yazzie,
Yeah.
Jack in the Box, all those.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that's the area we're talking about.
okay.
So Keegan, let me get the PowerPoint up and then just tell me when to hit the next slide.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. That was a great summary before, so hopefully I won't be repeating too much. But hi everyone, Keegan Gulick, city planner with MIG, and I'm just going to go over the staff report and a summary of the changes. So this is going to be affecting Section 250, Commercial Industrial Mixed Use Zone, to allow for warehouse and freight movement, and also revising the size of commercial retail uses within employment overlay areas. Next slide, please. These changes had to follow the legislative review process. So notices were sent to DLCD and notices were also posted publicly. The review criteria includes consistency with the comprehensive plan, consistency with the zoning code, effects to the transportation facilities, and the capability of the transportation system. Next slide, please. For the first one, consistency with the comprehensive plan, we found that these changes were consistent with several policies in the comprehensive plan, including Economic Policy 7, by adding in a new use and potential employment opportunity, Economic Policy 8, prohibiting large-scale retail uses in order to preserve the area for industrial, employment-intensive uses and family wage jobs, and Economic Policy 4, encouraging a variety of residential, commercial, office, entertainment, etc. uses by designating the lands north of Gleason and east of 223rd for mixed-use development. Next slide, please. For consistency with the zoning code, we found that these changes were consistent with the Wood Village Code. The zone's purpose is to encourage a variety of freeway-oriented and employment uses, which warehousing and freight would be. These standards are also consistent with Title IV, and they are consistent with consistent and compatible, with other allowed uses in the zone. Next slide, please. A TPR analysis, transportation planning rule analysis, found no net increase in trip generation. Trip rates for warehousing are lower than other commercial and industrial related uses that are already permitted in the zone. There are no changes in the functional classification of any streets with this change, and the changes are consistent with the transportation planning rule and Title VI of the Metro Urban Growth Management Functional Plan. Next slide, please. For statewide planning goals, we found that these changes are consistent with those goals. They further economic development. They do not negatively impact the transportation system or public facilities and services. They are consistent with the city's land use goals for the city and region, and no alteration to standards protecting housing, parks, or other city resources are affected with these changes. Next slide, please. And finally, we have the Metro Urban Growth Management Functional Plan. We found that the changes are consistent with the plan. They do not affect housing capacity or areas zoned for housing. There's no alteration to existing water quality, natural resource, or floodplain standards, and they support the use of industrial and other employment lands. Next slide, please. So based on these findings, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommends that the City Council approves the Zoning and Development Code Amendments, ZDC 2202. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, guys, any questions? Question in regards to not allowing automotive.
I know we did, it was about a year ago.
I know there's concerns about in commercial grinding on stuff.
Yep. And it was like that year ago we split out. So we had vehicle service and then auto repair. And then we added a third category. The name escapes me at the and that was something we did actually plan to bring back, looking at our LMGM and CI zones more comprehensively, because we've done that with, the town center last couple of years. We did that with our residential neighborhood commercial zone, but our industrial, more or less our industrial manufacturing zones haven't had that comprehensive look. That's something that's actually on this year's annual performance plan, and hopefully get going after the first of the year at some point, but really taking a comprehensive look at the allowed uses and the, a nice healthy mix of allowable uses. Mm-hmm.
They're in the commercial.
Mm-mm. No, they moved down. So affordable truck repair moved from what was EM zone right there by Old City Hall. They moved down to the back side of where Sutton is, to the CI zone. They that particular firm is difficult and that they assert they're just, they leased part of the property from Sutton, so the property was, allowed for freight movement. And they're just doing freight movement. We know there's more than that. They're relocating, I think, anytime now.
Yeah,
To a new
anytime.
facility, not in our city.
Oh,
Special, let's put it that way.
Yeah, we had significant issues when they're next to City Hall and trying to get them into compliance on several things. And then they quietly moved to a very out of the way area. And now they're moving out of the city.
no? Seems pretty cut and dry.
Yes.
Greg, if a type 4 is one of the times where we have to invite opponents and proponents and open.
Could open the hearing, probably should open the public hearing. In this case, because we're expanding the uses of the zone, it's not subject to restriction uses of that type of hearing, but you're certainly welcome to open the floor for any public comments. There were none submitted in advance of the meeting. And we do have a guest / observer who's certainly welcome to
Isn't this recommendation,
the city council.
we're not actually implementing this,
It'll go to the council at their August 23rd meeting for the ordinance consideration.
public meeting part, we'll open it up anyway.
It is a public hearing.
Click. Okay, I'll close the public hearing part. So, anybody want to make a motion? I can do it, or,
Go ahead. I couldn't find the words here, so
oh, okay. I highlighted it.
you highlight it, yeah.
To
Okay, I can make a motion. Recommend that the city council approves the zoning and development code amendment. Case file ZDC 22-02. That the council adopt ordinance 4-20.
I second.
Other discussion? Favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
thank you very much.
and business.
Thank you very much.